thanks for setting aside a time away from your ministry to care for yourself in this hour. I truly believe what's on the screen, that hurry mutes the voice of God and blinds us to other images of God around us. So that sentence will flavor everything that I want to talk about in the scriptures and the application of these scriptures in Exodus 2 and 3 to just a practice that's been immensely helpful for me over and over and over again to reconnect with God in the middle of crazy ministry days. So, again, think about the danger of trying to be a 10-man coach and be a mom and a dad and just all the things you're called to be and do without being attuned to the voice of God or being blind to the beauty of God's people, his images around us. So this is an important topic. We need to know how to locate God in ourselves and others in the course of ongoing everyday life. So I'm going to we're going to look at Exodus 2 and we're going to look through Exodus 3, verse 8. I've got it all on the screen. I'm going to set it up with 4 different scenes, and what we're going to see in these passages as we walk through these 4 scenes is that this is a statement I read in a commentary the other day. God is not in our kind of hurry. And this first scene, we see that God is not in our kind of hurry. So during those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. So this first scene, we see the setting where a whole generation, we've just learned in the earlier few verses of Exodus, the first generation died. And so here we have the second generation of the people of God still in slavery, groaning. You know, Pharaoh was a harsh master. They were enslaved. And I just want to zoom to what I see as an application for this call. I see in this groaning and in this enslaved people, all of your current and future 10-man clients. Mm-hmm. It dawned on me in this passage that these people are groaning largely because of the sins of other people, not just themselves. Not that they had sinned, but again, this is the second generation. So in their slavery, in the sin that other people, they were born into, in whether it was a verbal cry or just an internal groaning, we learned in Romans, these people, your future current 10-man clients, are suffering and they are groaning and they're crying for rescue. They know that life is broken. They know they need relief. They have to be wondering why God hasn't intervened sooner. They're probably telling themselves all kind of stories about where God is, and that's where we see that God is not in our kind of hurry. I assume all these people think that God is late or God is gone or God is not good. And so there we have it. So what is God doing while these people are groaning? Well, we see beautifully here that God heard them and that God knew. But another thing I just want you to see in scene 2 is not only does God hear and know, he begins to prepare a rescuer. And there's some lessons, I think, for how we care for ourselves and how we relate to God in the middle of a work day out of this passage. Scene 2 is directly after those verses in Exodus chapter 2. Now, the context here is, it seems like an abrupt scene change, and it is, but not to God. But I want you to notice that Moses is at work. This is a work day. Obviously, it's going to be the famous burning bush passage, but let's slow down and ask God what he has for us in this passage. So Moses is at work. He's keeping his flock, the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. I just want to point out a few things that are instructive for me and to think about being in the middle of the workday. And obviously, there's so much packed into this holy God encounter Moses had that we're not going to be able to comment on today. But for the purposes of this call, I just have highlighted two phrases. Up in verse 2, he sees this crazy, he beheld that a bush was burning and it wasn't being consumed. So, I mean, how can you not see that? But the instructive thing is in the middle of a busy day, because he's at work keeping the flock, he could have just saw it and moved on and continued his work. But for whatever reason, Moses said, I'm going to turn aside to see this great sight. So Moses slowed down in that moment to ponder, to think, to wonder, what in the world is up? I will turn aside. So he stopped in his tracks when he could have kept going. And I really think that this is a great illustration of him not being in a hurry. Because think about the tragedy if Moses had hurried along and not turned aside after he saw the bush burning to sit with it, he would have missed God. He would have missed the moment. And I love what it tells us about God. And I can't explain all the mystery of God, obviously, but Exodus 3:4 says, it wasn't until the Lord saw that he turned aside to see that God called him. So it's not like Moses is passing by, and God from 100 yards away is, hey, Moses, look at this burning bush. Pay attention, pay attention. It's like, no, there's the burning bush. Moses stopped. He stopped his hurry. He turned aside to see this great sight. And in the midst of Moses stopping and eliminating some hurry, God spoke to him. That's when the encounter happened, when the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see. Again, I'm not gonna give you a bunch of principles and laws, and I can't figure God out, but that strikes me as very curious that God is waiting on us. 1 Corinthians 13 says that love doesn't insist in its own way. There's super invitation in God. And so it seems like an invitation that when we stop, that the Lord moves in and wakes us up more to what he's up to. So an application from scene 2 to me is, as a 10-man coach on an average work day, we like to talk about when we take people on retreat, can you locate God? On a typical Tuesday at 2:00, what's God up to? So 10-man coaches on an average work day, just know that, are you in a hurry? This is both an external hurry and an internal hurry, because hurry does indeed mute the voice of God. And you guys and gals are the best in the business at helping people locate themselves. But your task, your privilege, your invitation is to always constantly paying attention to both God, who's in you and working through you and helping people locate themselves. So just it's a good metric, I would suppose. I know it is for me when I'm meeting with people one-on-one in spiritual direction, just to not be in a hurry, because hurry will mute the voice of God. And also hurry can, client after client after client. I'm sure the temptation at times it is for me to be blinded to God's images right there in front of me, whether in person or on a screen. And so it is the God in us who sees all of our clients as his beloved. And for me, that changes everything. That they're not problems to be solved or people to be figured out, but God's beloved to be loved. So that's an application. And in scene 3, I like to say it this way, but scene 2, let me back up. Moses hid his face for he's afraid to look at God. So now we have, after this brilliant encounter at the burning bush, God is actually preparing a servant to go serve these people we saw at the end of chapter 2. This is the preparation, in Henry Nouwen's words, of the wounded healer. But he was afraid. So I love to ask the question, well, what is God doing when Moses was afraid? Or what's God doing when you're afraid or lonely or feeling shame? Or anything else on the chart? What's God doing? And this next scene, the very next set of verses, I love, love, love these verses. And this will set forth the basis of the practice about what God's up to. Then the Lord said, I've surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me. And I've also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Out of that verse, my studies and some really good commentaries have told me, because I didn't take Hebrew, that there's brilliant Hebrew going on here. That these verses, Exodus 7 and 8, will show us what God's doing when you're afraid. These verses show us God's attention and intention towards you. One commentator said that this is God's first major speech. There are 6 first-person verbs that clarify God's attention and his intention towards you. And there, I've laid them out there. And so what you'll see, like on, I can't highlight that, it'll advance the screen. Anyway, like on number 1 is the actual verse, as you can see. And then I can see you out to the side. This is where I learned this practice reading The Joyful Journey with Jim Wilder and his team. And so I just love these phrases. I have seen, I have heard, I know, so I've come down to rescue, which in Wilder's interpretation is, I want to be with you in this and treat your weakness tenderly. I've seen, second time to say he sees them, and come, I will send you to Pharaoh. So out of that text, I mean, what I see God doing, some of y'all were on the call last month with Nathan, started talking about attaching. Obviously, one of the keys to secure attachment is the responsiveness of the primary caregiver, and God is the ultimate perfect primary caregiver. So in essence, what I see here is God, according to Phil and Todd's 5 A's, he's attuning and attaching, or who is it? Siegel with the four S's and what God is seeing and soothing so they can be safe and secure. There's lots of other ways to look at this, but that's what I see God doing. I see God showing up to Moses when he's afraid after this great encounter, and God is actively pursuing him. A few words about these phrases, and then I just actually want to lead you in this practice and show you some applications of it. But this first one is super meaningful for me, that God is always letting me know, Chuck, I can see you. It has been said by many people that most people, when they feel seen, feel loved. It's almost imperceptible, the difference between feeling seen and being loved. And that's particularly important for my story that I learned really through Tin Man and Tin Man Intensives is like, man, my baseline story, because of the way I was raised in my family of origin, is that I feel all alone and therefore on my own. And that's very lonely. And I can be super dangerous because I'm not a quitter. So I go out and rage on the world. And so it is such a daily practice for me to sit and imagine God just reminding me, Chuck, I can see you. But secondly, we saw this at the end of chapter 2. We see it again here in chapter 3. Even though we may doubt that God's present, but God can hear us. And he wants you to know, hey, Moses, I see you. I hear you. And that's super important. I've learned that, again, God is not in our kind of hurry, which means we're invited to wait on God all the time. And it seems that two of the major temptations that we face while we're waiting on the Lord to do something is to begin to tell ourselves a false story that he's not aware or that he doesn't care. In this passage, we see that God is aware and God cares. I can see you, I can hear you. And then this next phrase about I understand how overwhelming, that comes, let me just show you this phrase says, I know they're suffering. That's the Hebrew word yada, Y-A-Y-A-D-A, and this is fascinating. Y'all probably already know this. This is kind of right at the core of what y'all are doing and what you're teaching others about God. But this Hebrew word yada is more than just awareness that they're suffering. It literally means that God knows it from his insides. That's what the Hebrew means. God knows they're suffering. He is feeling with them. Straight out of the Hebrew text. So God sees the misery, he hears, and he knows, he feels, which means in Wilder's terminology, I can understand how overwhelming this is for you. And the beautiful thing is that God continues and says, so I've come down to rescue them. Or, hey, in these overwhelming circumstances and overwhelming emotions, I want to be with you in this and treat your weakness tenderly because I can do something about what you're going through. What a God we have that he comes down into our world to rescue us. He comes down into our mess, our circumstances, our zip code, our emotions, our circumstances to help. So over and over again, well, let me just stop sharing for a minute. I'm going to go back there because I can't see your faces. Before I lead you in this practice, let's just pause. What are you present to?
I'll wade into that question, Chuck. I'm present to how I so quickly I know I know where it comes from. I so quickly assume God is uninterested when he's not in my kind of hurry. I'm really struck by that as you walk us through this.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Phil.
I'd say for me, Chuck, knowing and believing that there's a chasm there right now for me. I
Yeah.
know it to be true, but I'm not experiencing the truth of what I know to be true.
Yeah.
So I would say lonely, I guess, would be the lonely and fear, shame. What I'm experiencing as you read this.
Yeah. Thanks, Todd.
I'm present, Chuck, to like that's wonderful for everybody else
Yeah.
in my but me. Like so,
Yeah.
I'll tell everybody.
Yep. Thanks, Pat. I don't think you're alone in that. But what if it is true? What difference would that make if that's true for us, that God is this good?
Present in my impatience. I had a client yesterday that was in the middle of a very significant emotional moment and sharing that with me. And I spent some time with him in that, but I moved too quickly into analysis
Hmm.
and trying to figure it out and help him figure it out instead of like hearing this reminds me that our awareness is secondary to what God is doing and being present and receptive and patient and waiting.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Roy.
Chuck, I heard someone interact with this passage once and say, perhaps God is wanting us to be less interested in being like Moses and more interested in being like that bush, being able to burn without burning up or burning out. And um, yeah, I'm just present to the dangers of hurry when it comes to
Yeah.
having kind of a fire or the energy to be able to be consumed and used.
Yeah. I'm going to have to sit with that. I like that. I received that as an invitation. Thanks, Brian.
I know something that I'm present with as we read through the passage was how I guess I feel fear when it comes to it a little bit, especially when it comes to clients and when they relapse or when they backslide and just asking, questions about yourself and your coaching or where they're at and not trying to like dive too deep into analysis, but actually being with them in that. So
Yeah.
that's what I get present with.
Yeah. Thanks, Maria. Yeah. And I'm very present to y'all's one-on-one or group work. It is holy ground, right? You're doing the presence of God, caring for souls. And that's why I love the emphasis Bill and Todd are putting on your care and self-care, because the more we're present to this God, I think we can be more present for others and noticing that fear, because it's going to come up, right? The goal isn't to avoid being scared like Moses. But what do we do when we're afraid? So you all, I mean, like I said, Jim Wilder, Joyful Journey, you guys are more advanced than me in this, but you can read about, in his words, all the neurobiology behind all this. Man, just interacting in healthy ways with God is just embodied healing over and over and over again through repetitive practices. Todd pointed out what I like to call the God gap between, most leaders admit that our experience of the love of God doesn't match our knowledge about the love of God. And I think that's true for everybody. We see Paul on his knees in Ephesians 3 in that famous prayer calling all the power of heaven and earth to come to bear on one problem. And the problem was, and his request was so that they would know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge. And that's the gap. Those are not the same word for knowing. So that's what Todd pointed out. And that's where we all are. We do have this God gap. None of us fully image God perfectly, experience God to the full, but we want more. And Jeremiah 9 talks about the same thing. It's like the prophet said, man, if you're going to boast on anything, boast that you know and understand me. I mean, again, that's the left brain, right brain going on right there. But the point of me bringing that up is to say the way we heal those God gaps is just repeated loving encounters with the risen Christ. So this passage, these two verses, these 6 first-person verbs that show God's attention and intention have been one of the most healing practices for me the last couple of years. Just when I get freaked out, overwhelmed, scared, lonely, feeling shame, I just may not even be able to articulate what's on the chart, but I know in my body that things aren't right. Man, I just try to steal away 3 to 5 minutes and just imagine God saying these things over me. It has been life-giving. Sometimes, and it's not always the same phrase that really intersects with my soul and body and emotions on a particular day. But if you would allow me the privilege, I would love just to lead you in this prayer practice rather than kind of teaching it to you. So I know this will be me helping create space for you and God. Is that okay, Phil, for me to do at this point?
Yeah, man,
please.
fantastic. Please do
Yeah.
that.
So I just invite you in the middle of your real life on this real Tuesday, 10:38 Central Time, just to get present. Well, actually, I'm going to pause. Life's not perfect. I want to show you one other slide. Then we'll be right back. Hold on. Whoop. Now I've really goofed things up. Just a second. I'm the least technological person I know.
Note that, coaches.
Note that. Here we go. 2 major implications of this passage for you. I'm present to, praying for you. First, the reason this is important, I just want you to notice the God in you while coaching is this God. This is what God is doing for all of your clients. He does see them. He does hear them. He does know their suffering. He is feeling with them. He is moving toward them. He has come down to help them. And he has come down to them first and foremost in the ultimate Moses, which is Jesus Christ. And then he's coming to them over and over again as Christ in you, the hope of glory. So this is the God that indwells you while you're coaching. And this is what he is doing. This is the way he sees, feels, hears, and moves toward all of your clients. And not only that, this is the God for you while you're coaching. Again, this Moses wasn't on a retreat. This was a middle of a work day.
Hmm.
And the Matthew 11 easy yoke is not a retreat passage. It's a work passage. You don't put on a yoke and go on retreat. You put on a yoke and go to work. And so the burden of ministry can be super heavy because we're dealing with souls, but Jesus invites us to come to him and experience the light yoke of working with him and not just for him.